Western Reserve University. We are in Cleveland, Ohio, and we are a graduate-heavy, more STEM-focused doctoral granting university. And however, that's not the population that we worked with for this particular project. We were working with an undergraduate class for one of our general seminars. I'll let Einav talk a little bit more about that. I'll actually pass the baton off to Einav to start us off talking about why why she wanted to work with Wikipedia in her class.
Yeah, so thank you, Amanda, and thank you everyone for organizing this panel. As Amanda said, this was an undergraduate class. It's part of the general education requirements. That means the class is about teaching students some writing skills, some research skills, and kind of like get them to a good start in their academic career. And Wikipedia kind of like lent itself, both in terms of context-wise. The specific course was about gender and technology, and it seemed very appropriate that we will do some project that will enhance women's visibility, especially women's STEM visibility on Wikipedia and on the internet at large. So in terms of the content of the course, it really fit, but also there were a couple of pedagogical reasonings. One is really to teach students to experiment and to experience different genres of writing and different skills of writing, and really to think of them about themselves as content producers, not only for the teacher or for the class, but for the public. So I'm kind of like a big proponent of public history. So for me, that was an important thing of like letting students and encourage them to think about of themselves as public scholars. Another reason was to really increase student engagement in writing and kind of like doing something else from the traditional paper that they usually write and they usually don't care much about. So the idea about writing to Wikipedia was that they would be maybe more accountable if they are writing not just for me and to get a grade, but the actual people around the world, but also that it will help them to engage more with the project and to do more research, to kind of like be more accountable of their writing. And the last thing that really kind of like pushed Wikipedia as a good candidate is because it's such a, it's on one hand like a source that we all use and such a kind of like useful source, but on the other hand, it's also, you know, a famously known don't use type of source and has a lot of problems. And that assignment was about letting students really think critically about what is Wikipedia and how can and if we should use it, and really think about this source that on one hand can be useful to their academic career, but also need to be thinking about more critically when they use it and when they cite it. So I let, I think, Amanda or Jen to continue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Starkey. I'm a librarian at Case Western Reserve University. Einav reached out to me the semester before she started planning this assignment to kind of begin talking about how to approach this. And I think at the time we really had no idea how great this would become. I think she was really more reaching out to talk about how to help students find sources that they can use for their Wikipedia project entries. And then I talked to my colleague Amanda, who's also, you just met earlier, presenting on today's panel. She is on the Friedman Center for Digital Scholarship team. So I brought her in as a good collaborator to kind of complement both the sort of technical critical thinking aspects, digital literacy aspects of the project, and also to think about the, the information literacy side of the project. So the three of us as a team had really complementary expertise in terms of approaching how to do this with the students. So it became pretty clear in the beginning that the librarians, Amanda and I, were uniquely positioned to work with the students on the digital literacy and critical information literacy components of the class. So having gone from an idea for one class session, we ended up moving to a 3-session plan with a 4th session that ended up being a kind of open work session for the students that was also really productive. This whole undertaking and the assignment and working with Wikipedia was new to all 3 of us at the beginning. So I recommend anyone who hasn't worked with Wikipedia just approaching it with sort of a disposition of experimentation and having fun with it, because it's not, there's no roadmap. We have provided some, examples of a way to approach it, but there's always, twists and turns and uncertainty. So having that sort of experimentative attitude towards a project like this is, I think, really helpful. So we after talking it through, we had 3 sort of main sessions for the content. The first session was really putting the sort of ethical and social aspects of Wikipedia into conversation. And the second session was really more about sort of how to find and identify research content and information to edit Wikipedia articles with reliably. And the third session was really more the sort of technical aspect of getting into Wikipedia and how to do the editing and how to use the editor on the Wikipedia site.
Yeah, so Jen pretty much outlined this, but like the first class, we really spent a lot of time diving into a lot of the different, ethical issues and other issues that always come up anytime we're talking about Wikipedia, about bias and reliability, about privilege and access, who has access to it and in what languages, and the biases, potentially both within the articles and as to, who is actually, behind who is actually writing the articles, and the different aspects of privilege related to that. And what we did is we discussed this in the class by breaking the class up into groups, and we gave each group an article that related to a different issue. Some of them were about different hoaxes, or some were about bias in authorship, trustworthiness of information. I think one of the ones that everybody found interesting was somebody who edited a band's page so that he could try to get VIP access to the band, and as well as one about the longest running hoax, I think, on Wikipedia. The article was out there for about 10 years, and about a fake Australian Aboriginal god, which in and of itself, is brings up a lot of these particular issues to discuss. And we use this as a jumping off point to discuss sort of the benefits and the challenges of an open, easily accessible and easily editable platform like Wikipedia. And then we went ahead, and after having this discussion, we asked the class, if you were developing Wikipedia, what would your guidelines and principles be? And then after a little bit more discussion, came up with that and compared that to the 5 pillars of Wikipedia that they sort of base everything on. And, a lot of these things are, how do you balance openness with reliability? How would you address bias, both in terms of what is deemed, what makes an article Wikipedia worthy versus the actual writing within the article itself. And then we ended the class with a very brief demonstration of just how easy it is to actually go in and edit a Wikipedia article. And so that was the first class that we did. Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about the second class?
Sure. The second class is where we dug into the research skill set needed and information literacy skills, focused on locating source material and evaluating resources that might be used to edit and serve as citations for a Wikipedia entry. This is the first session where we introduced the idea of the notability requirements that Wikipedia has. And we learned a lot through this process as well that we're happy to share with you about what the guidelines for notability are for a Wikipedia article. They require that there are at least, they say, multiple corroborating published sources. So unpublished sources were not, so some archival sources, for example, would not have been enough weight to alone have someone or an entry or a topic qualify as meeting the notability requirements. So for this class session, we focused a lot on reference sources, background information sources, how to find those and how to cite them. In Wikipedia, we logged into the Wikipedia platform and just demonstrated with one of our notable Case Western Reserve University female alumna. We logged into the Wikipedia entry and added a citation for a piece of information about her that we found in a biographical source. In the second iteration of the class during this session, we also involved our copyright specialist librarian who talked about finding and using images and how to find images that are that can be used without copyright concerns on Wikipedia. Both sessions we invited a member of our archive staff, one of our archivists, to come and talk about using and finding archival sources. We presented the option to the students to choose notable Case Western Reserve University female alumna in science and engineering fields who were potentially underrepresented or not represented at all biographically on Wikipedia. Some students did choose that option, but we also noted that at this point that to be cautious of that there are published sources in addition to the archival sources that were being used to meet that notability requirement. So this is sort of when we really identified the challenge of finding a topic for each student that was the right granularity, because as you know, people who are well known and institutions, organizations, topics that are well known are already well addressed on Wikipedia. So students ended up, needing to find examples for topics that were pretty either lesser known, more obscure, harder to find information about. So that's sort of a paradox right there with, they're harder to find information on Wikipedia about, but they're also harder to find information anywhere about. So that was one of our takeaways from this, is helping guide the students to finding the right size and the right scope of a topic to write about in Wikipedia. So that was our second class session in a nutshell.
And then I went ahead and led the third session. So I had never edited Wikipedia before we started working on this class. So I ended up going in and sort of teaching myself, okay, how do I sign up for this? And what are all of the aspects of a biographical entry that should be there? How do you make those, nice, neat little info boxes? And are there, different authority controls we should be looking at and things like that? So once I'd gone through and I ended up creating a practice one in the sandbox area about my dog, just to practice, which was kind of fun to show. And so that allowed me to then go in and then I really did sort of a step-by-step, workshop class where I would show them all, by this point, all of them should have had signed up for an account already. And I would show them how to log in using that account, how to access the sandbox area of it, which is where you can go ahead and you can draft your articles before submitting them to actually be part of Wikipedia. So the students could leave the stuff in the sandbox for to be reviewed if they wanted to. If they decided not to, go ahead and submit it. And then I would show them how to go ahead and use the different editing functions, how to format, how to add things like the info box and things of that nature. And this wouldn't take up the entire class session, which was actually a good thing. There were usually, a good 15 minutes or so left at the end of class so that they could start practicing some of this on their own, and I could go around and I could answer questions that people were having some issues with. And then, as we talked about in the second iteration of the class, we added an entire extra class session for people to be able to come in, and we would be available to help them both with the technical aspects if they were having trouble actually getting in and creating the entries, but also if they were had some questions about research, or can I use this particular source, or any sort of questions related to the assignment that we would be able to help with. And that working session, I think, was very, very helpful to the class, because it meant that everybody both had some time together to work on things, but also that they had an easy place to get these questions specific to their individuals and their individual assignments answered.
Yeah, so I'll go and talk a little bit about the results of that. And I think that, overall, it was very positive experience, both for us and the students. All students wrote and completed the assignment. Not all students actually published that. About half of them did. We're not sure why it was. Some of it maybe have to do with the fact that it was on the spring semester and they went home and, they got a grade and they forgot about it. And they never bothered to enter to Wikipedia and to actually press submit. But some maybe just didn't felt confident about their assignment, even though all of them, and it was really refreshing as a professor to read, really, really engaged with the research for that. This was definitely the best cited papers I ever read in my career as a professor, partly because they were very, very anxious about not breaking any copyrights rules. So it was all very correct and very up to the point. So it was kind of like refreshing that they really cared about. They were really kind of like, even up to the absurd that, oh my God, like the police was going to knock on my door if I'm going to write something that I'm not supposed to write. So I think that sense of accountability really helped them. And as Jen said, for some of it, it was challenging in terms of finding sources. Some of them had to change their subject in the middle of the way just because there was not enough information, or that by the time someone else wrote a Wikipedia already on that person. So that was a bit of a challenging, especially for those who kind of like felt, well, I can't find anyone to write about. So we had to do some kind of like work there. But I think that overall, they felt that, oh my God, we contribute something to the world, and we tell someone about a woman that nobody knew. And even if afterwards, those entries were edited by, the Wikipedia people or other users, they felt really proud that, because they were the first to actually put their name on Wikipedia, they got a chance to contribute to kind of like a broader knowledge. So they weren't, it wasn't an issue of like, oh, someone else will edit my work. That was not a problem we encountered. Another thing that was maybe surprising, as Amanda said, these were very STEM-oriented students. And yet, despite this fact, they are really, for some, it was really challenging, both the technical issue of writing in Wikipedia and actually kind of like understanding the format. But also, I think they really like this shift of thinking themselves as producers of content and not consumers of content, was kind of like a switch that they had to make. And for some, it was more challenging than the others. And the fact that it was a bit new, it wasn't their first semesters, but they never had to do such a paper. They kind of like, and some of them were very uncomfortable of getting out of this comfort zone of this traditional seminar paper. And they were really, they didn't know how they're going to be assessed, how do you know if what I'm doing is right? The way to solve it was by give them a really detailed grading rubric that I think set the expectations and help them to kind of like understand, okay, what are we supposed to get out of it? But it was something that not everybody felt very, at ease in kind of like doing something that for many of them was a new thing. There were some who wrote and edited Wikipedia before, but they were very, very few.
Did you have anything more that you wanted to say about any of the student challenges, or should I hop into some of the?
I mean, I think that one last thing that I want to say, I mean, Jen kind of like referred to it as well, but we kind of like as students lean towards kind of like more biographical essays and not kind of like a more general organizations or general elements, even though they had the possibilities. And I think that on the one hand, they maybe thought that, oh my God, to write about an entire organization would be, more work, even though that it might have been an easier work for them. But that's something that we had to think about and kind of like how to convince students that, even if it's not a biographical entry, it can still be done, it can still be useful. And really think of setting the expectations, I think, straight. That's, I think, what we learned the most. But yeah, you can go ahead and.
So, and then there were a couple of sort of technical and classroom issues that we ran into as we were running this, particularly the first time that we had course corrected for later. One is that, as it turns out, when we were first doing the assignment, the campus IP got blocked from being able to edit Wikipedia for a fairly lengthy period of time. And normally there's this form that you can, fill out, and they'll just, double check things, and, there might be a slight delay, but you'll still be able to sign up for your account. And that just sort of didn't happen. So we had to direct students to go to like a Starbucks or something that was just off campus that would have them logging in with a different IP address in order to sign up for their accounts, which of course would be a lot more would potentially be more challenging these days. But that was how we ended up going around that. And that hasn't been an issue for us since, but because of the shall we say, shenanigans that can happen on college campuses, it is a possibility that that is something that could come up. Another one was when we did the live editing demo in the first class, we encouraged the students to try it themselves, and they were very excited about that, but we ended up having trouble pulling their attention back. So I was very glad that was pretty much at the end of the class for that day. So in the second iteration, we just demoed it as opposed to inviting the students to try it along with us. And then the only other thing that we ran into was in the second class when we had our research librarian and our archivist and our copyright specialist speaking. It was hard to balance the amount of time that everybody had in it. So it felt, that particular session felt a little bit compressed. So we recommend considering how much time different people, if you want to bring in extra speakers to address certain things, how much time everybody has, and putting some hard limits on that, but also considering just having them make some, whether it be a Canvas module or a LibGuide or something like that, some of the information available for reference later. And I know, made a pretty extensive LibGuide, which is linked in the chapter, that had a lot of information on this. So if somebody missed something in the class, a lot of times they would be able to refer to that later as well. And then, did you want to talk a little bit about just general wrap up, Jen?
I just had a couple of comments that I wanted to share as well about, just to wrap things up and kind of think about how this assignment could be adapted in a virtual learning setting. Because what our assignment was, and assuming in our lesson plans in the chapter, the 4-session lesson plan in the chapter is assuming in-person class sessions. And I could see adapting to the online environment, rather than having live presenters at each of the sessions. I think certainly breaking it up topic-wise into the 3 areas, sort of the ethical and social considerations, the research and the information literacy considerations, and sort of the digital literacy and technical considerations, kind of breaking it up that way still makes sense, but might consider offloading some of the in-class materials by developing a series of videos and demos that students could then refer back to as they're working through their assignments as well. That might adapt well into the digital, to sort of a virtual classroom setting. And of course, the really important session where we were available to work one-on-one with students, that could also be adapted into sort of like, a drop-in consultation sessions with any of the instructors and librarians involved, to do that sort of one-on-one check-in with each person about where they are with their topics, how they feel about the technical aspects. And I think it could be easily adapted to the virtual environment.
And it also, I mean, the requirements of the general education requirement in our university is that the student will produce a research paper. So they had to kind of like write from zero. So we had to find, women or topics that are not appear in Wikipedia or have like a very minimal stub. But this assignment can definitely be used as an editing project of editing and adding to existing Wikipedia entries that will expand the pool. For our purposes in that class, it wasn't possible, but it is possible to translate it into when you do other classes or other assignments.
And that's what we had. That's sort of the general overview of what we did and how we approached everything.
Hi. So my name is Lara Nicosia, and we thought that I would share a little bit about some of my experiences at the University of Rochester and the Rochester Institute of Technology. And then we would take questions at the end, unless someone has a really burning question right now before we switch over. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen here quick. Okay. So hi, as I mentioned, my name is Lara, and I'm currently the History and Religion and Classics Librarian at the University of Rochester. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences at University of Rochester, as well as my prior institution, the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is where I really got started and started my interest in Wikipedia projects in the classroom. And then I have with me a faculty member from our Eastman School of Music, Anaar Desai-Stephens, who is going to talk a little bit about a Wikipedia project that we're actually running in her class this semester. So my experiences are very similar to what my co-presenters have already covered. It was funny when I read the chapter in the book, I was like, this was me. Everything that they talked about, I had a very similar experience for. And so I'm not going to necessarily go through all of that again. I'll just point out this particular text is what inspired the project that I worked on with with a faculty member at the Rochester Institute of Technology. She had read a chapter in this book and had approached me about doing a Wikipedia-based project on related to women's history, being inspired by this. And at the time, I had very limited Wikipedia editing experience. I had done a little bit kind of casually just for fun, but I had never really worked with it before. And it was a fun project to take on, and it turned into a really great collaboration where we ran this project for 4 or 5 different semesters. And each time I feel like we really were able to mold it and make it better and better each time. We kind of learned from all of our past experiences. So for example, one thing that we learned from the first semester was that the students, they created these great entries, but they had a lot of trouble moving them to the live site. So we made sure we built in a class session that was specifically our go live date. We all moved the entries together, and then the students had 2 weeks to kind of watch what happened to their entries and then write responses on, did other people make changes? Was there anything in the talk pages? Kind of what was that experience like? So that was a way that the project kind of evolved from the very beginning, where it was more just about creating and then more about looking at the overall publication process. As a librarian, I'll just say things that I've really liked about working on these Wikipedia projects is that it's allowed me to become involved in the content creation process. Typically, I work with students when they're looking for sources. I might meet with them for a class and talk about where to find information, but I don't necessarily have the opportunity to see what they do with the information once they find it. And so being able to be part of that process has been really meaningful. And it's also helped me advocate for some resources for the library, particularly in past examples, where I've been able to see where students aren't finding what they need. And I can point to specific projects that would benefit from having access to certain resources in the library. So I found that that is kind of an unintended consequence. It's been really positive about these experiences. So on this slide here for getting started, I highlighted just some of the ways that these projects might come about. In my experience, a lot of times it's about faculty interest. That was my initial experience. But as time goes on and you have conversations with people, people hear and you become kind of the Wikipedia person. I've had some side conversations with faculty about things. Also conversations with your colleagues. So for example, when I moved over to the University of Rochester last October, one of my colleagues was aware that I had experience with Wikipedia projects. And so she invited me to join a chemistry class that was working on a Wikipedia project to be able to help in that context. So I think that just kind of faculty a lot of time are going to drive these projects. But I think that having conversations and working to kind of build your reputation on campus can help lead to these moments where you're suddenly seen as, oh yeah, there's this opportunity here with these Wikipedia projects. For librarian interest, I've attended a lot of workshops in this area. I wanted to learn more about it after working on these projects and have tried to become at times an active editor on the site just to kind of keep my interest going. And I think that in doing that, it helps you see these opportunities to find what is the right assignment for a Wikipedia project so that you can be prepared to pitch it when those moments come up. But if you are going to pitch it, it's also important to understand what you're actually asking. I mean, they're fairly involved projects, so you have to be able to be prepared to talk about how this is going to look in the context of the class and why this doesn't have to be a scary thing and can actually be really beneficial for that particular moment. And then for community interest, this is a little bit more thinking outside of the classroom. So again, at RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, we, in addition to doing this class, we held an annual Wikipedia edit-a-thon that was focused on women. We called it Women on Wikipedia. It was about getting more women to edit, as well as increasing content on women. It was inspired by the Art Plus Feminism edit-a-thon, if you're familiar with that. And one of my great colleagues kind of brought this idea that we should think about taking this on. And I had the opportunity to work on it. And it was really just a great event that kind of expanded what we were doing in the classroom. And what we were able to do is really leverage the experience of the students in the classroom and bring them in as sort of our expert editors for future edit-a-thons. So we would call on students who had taken the class to come and volunteer during the edit-a-thon to both contribute and help others who were new to editing. So it kind of brought the assignment beyond just the walls of that one class assignment, which is nice. So I just wanted to point out that there's all sorts of different types of assignments that you can do around Wikipedia. So a lot of times when we think about Wikipedia, we think about entry creation or editing. A lot of times these are biographical entries, usually to address some type of bias that exists on Wikipedia, and those are fantastic assignments. Those are often semester-long, large undertaking assignments. But there's lots of different types of assignments that you can do with this tool. So for example, Wikipedia is always looking for copy editors. I mean, you could have like a writing class who is, doing some copy editing, or there's a lot of bias in the way that entries are written. So there's tips on how to address gender bias in writing of entries. You could have students look at that for some entries. There's opportunities to do things with data and coding. So in preparation for this, I was looking at some of the versions of Wikipedia outside of the English-based Wikipedia that we're all used to. And it turns out that the Swedish language Wikipedia has the most content after the English language, which surprised me. And it's because somebody created a bot to translate articles into Swedish. And so they've upped the amount of content that they had. So if you had a class with, a computer science class or something, you could have students look at some of these different types of opportunities that are there. And there's a lot of great data available from Wikipedia that you can use for large data sets. Language translation. So this is tied into what I was just talking about. So this map here shows for October number of page views by country. So the US is the #1 page viewer for all Wikimedia projects with over 4 billion. Japan comes in second with over 1 billion, followed by Great Britain and India. But there's over 315 different language versions of Wikipedia. We're used to sitting in the English language version, but there are lots and lots of different versions of Wikipedia out there. And so where the daily average for October for English language Wikipedia was about 250 million per day. Okay, of the English language version. The Japanese version is 35 million per day, and Arabic is 7 million per day. They're still getting a lot of hits. And what Wikipedia really needs is they need people to translate some of this content into other languages. So they need English language content to be translated into these, into Arabic and Japanese and so on. But they also, to help address some of this Western bias that exists on Wikipedia, need things from these other countries and cultures translated into English to help widen knowledge on those topics. So you could have a modern languages class that could work on translating content from Wikipedia. And then I put on here smaller tasks, because when we think about Wikipedia, we tend to think of these big, large scale, okay, let's all create an entry, let's, translate all these entries and so on. But there are little things that can be incorporated into a class assignment that doesn't have to be a full entry. So when we used to run the Women on Wikipedia Edit-a-thon, one of the things we would have people do is add these entries for further reading. So these are things that are not actually cited in the paper, but are sources that are relevant to a topic. So for example, one time as a demonstration, I showed Louise Slaughter was the congresswoman for the Rochester area. And so at the bottom, I added a further reading, to her current biography entry. So the idea is if somebody wanted to learn more about her, this might be some place to go. So that's a fairly easy task for students to do, because it's about finding sources that have decent biographical information, but it doesn't involve them having to write out an entire entry, and they're moving toward improving the content on the site. These info boxes are another option. So these boxes over here on the right-hand side, these are kind of a common staple of Wikipedia, but a lot of times entries don't have them, particularly for these smaller entries, groups that tend to be less represented on Wikipedia. They might be missing these types of entries. So you could have an assignment where students are just updating these info boxes. Similarly, somebody talked about images in their last presentation, right? You can also have an assignment where people are interested in finding images that can be uploaded. There's a lot of restrictions with copyright on what can be uploaded to Wikipedia, but it'd be a great assignment to talk about all those copyright considerations and move toward improving the site. Categories would be another option. So a lot of entries at the bottom have these categories, and these category labels are what help get people into lists like this that you might have seen. Sometimes you stumble across these on Wikipedia. So it'll be like list of female tennis players, or if these are female members of the US House of Representatives. This only happens if the appropriate category labels are assigned to those articles. So having people assign category labels around a theme or topic could be an assignment. And then another option might be some type of pre-work. So for example, you could have a semester where students are trying to identify those entries on Wikipedia that don't have representation, and then find maybe a couple sources that might be good for those. And then another semester, students could work off of that list of entries and work on actually creating them. You could split out the assignment so that it's not somebody has to find the content and then also edit the content and all of that. You can kind of divide it up amongst groups, and it would be a way to continue this conversation about how voices are missing from the conversation, and then work over multiple semesters to kind of improve that and fill in the gaps. Okay, so the last thing I just want to talk about really quickly is the Wikimedia Education Foundation, if you're not familiar with it. So as a librarian, I always enjoy having these opportunities to work on these Wikipedia assignments, but sometimes that doesn't work with your class schedule, or sometimes you might not have somebody available to you who's comfortable working with Wikipedia. The Wikimedia Education Foundation provides a ton of great resources for this. So through there, you can get access to a timeline for assignments. So you can find out, I'm thinking of doing this, what should my timeline be? There's training materials, there's videos, it walks students through the entire editing process. There's lots of robust content around that. And it gives you access to this dashboard. So this is an example of what one of their dashboard pages look like, where you can actually very easily track what your students are doing in Wikipedia. So this is, I stripped out the personalized content, but this is from a class that I help support. It showed you that at the time that I pulled this, that 6 new articles were created, 17 articles were edited. So you can kind of see right now your impact of this assignment. And then you could see by student. So these would be all the students' user accounts. You could see how many words did they add to a particular site. Underneath the articles tab, if you were on the live site, it shows you once the article was edited, how many people have looked at it since then. So you could see down the road, like what type of impact your class may have actually had. So this is really valuable for assessment, in addition to having access to the training material and an expert from the Wikimedia Foundation. And so I think I'm going to stop there and pass it over to my co-presenter, Dr. Desai-Stephens, who's going to talk a little bit about her experiences this semester.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me here. It's been so great to hear everybody else's experiences. So yeah, as Lara mentioned, we are in the midst of a kind of Wikipedia pedagogical experiment as we speak. So to your point, Jennifer, I am teaching online this semester, although it's synchronous. So I'm teaching a graduate seminar called Music, Gender, Body, Performance. It's taught as a small graduate seminar, about 13 people. We are online, but it's essentially this, right? I'm not doing asynchronous, I'm doing it on Zoom. And a quick note about the profile of the class, because that's part of what prompted me to do this assignment. So it's graduate, but it's across levels. So I have a few musicology PhD students. I have a few, about probably half what we call DMA students. So that's Doctor of Musical Arts, which is to say graduate students who are performing very high level musical performance degrees, most of whom are East Asian. So that's also a factor here. And then I have a few master's students in both academic and performance fields. We meet just once a week, and so that has also shaped how I've structured the assignment, because I could, but I felt reticent to give over my only meeting in a week to working on this, so it's been divided. So much as the Case Western team mentioned, I was really excited about the opportunity Wikipedia presents to make students into active producers of knowledge, to get them to think more critically about particularly gendered representation in the public sphere, but representation in general. And I was interested in having them think about who and what is represented, right? But also how they are represented, the kinds of categories they might go under, the kinds of language being used, and then also who is doing the representing. Before starting this assignment and working with Lara, I didn't realize that the majority of Wikipedia editors are white Euro-American men, which is pretty fascinating, right? So the other thing that was also very appealing to me about this assignment was the very fact that Wikipedia does not allow you to make an argument, so to speak, right? As it asks you to kind of objectively report on information. And as much as I spend a lot of my time as telling my students that in a way objectivity is an ever receding point, that it's not something that we can necessarily ever fully encapsulate, what I liked was the fact that this kind of assignment would get students to work with the very important skills of research and writing without necessarily asking them to formulate an original argument by the end. Because I often find in the course of a semester, like, that's actually a lot to ask for, especially if it's a big topic, you know, to say like, okay, put your own spin on something. So this gets them to pull together a lot of the pieces in a compelling, authoritative synthesis without necessarily feeling the pressure of having to say something original about it. For those who are considering putting together an assignment like this, in addition to the chapter, the Open Education chapter that's already been written, I thought I'd do a quick screen share and walk you through how I scaffolded this, because I really heavily scaffolded it. So it's a big project, but it's really the students' final project for the semester. And I didn't want to start it too early in the semester because they did have a midterm. So I didn't want them to be totally overwhelmed. So I kind of seeded the idea early, right? In the first day of class, I said, we'll be doing a Wikipedia editing project. And I kept on telling them to think about it, but we really didn't start it until mid-semester. So that was the first time Lara came in and gave us a really beautiful presentation on what wikis are, on Wikipedia as a kind of knowledge ecosystem, and on some of the finer points of Wikipedia editing. So that's where they had signed up for their first, for their account. The week after that, I had them choose a topic. And in order to kind of deal with the challenges that Wikipedia's notability criteria poses, I asked them to go from the Women in Red list and to look at musicians who are listed in there. So there aren't categories for everything, but there are categories for like violinists, I think, and pianists and composers. Or I asked them to come up with enough to show me that there was at least some initial amount of research out there. And I had them submit an informal proposal to me, just saying the topic they wanted to talk about, why, and giving me some backups, which actually turned out to be pretty important. Just a few weeks ago, we had our second workshop from Lara. So she talked about both the kinds of sources that Wikipedia wants to see and actually how you do citations in Wikipedia. And of course, Wikipedia is interesting in that it actually privileges public and open access sources. So the students are so used to being told, you have to go find scholarly sources, you have to go find scholarly sources, that they sometimes limited themselves more than I wanted them to. But I had them submit also an annotated bibliography at this point, precisely so I could troubleshoot that with them. How much have you found? Does it look like you're going to have enough at this point? Do you need to jump ship to another topic? And the annotation part just meant that they were already further along than they thought they were, right? It meant that they already had materials. They already knew how they were going to fit it all together. A couple of weeks ago, I had them meet with me just to touch base. Okay, how's your project going? Many of them submitted to me an outline by this point. It wasn't required, but it was an opportunity to say, okay, how do you think you're going to structure the whole thing? How's it going to fit together? And after Thanksgiving, we're going to come back for a peer review, and then they're going to do 2 weeks of in-class presentations. And in that final class, Lara is again going to join us for a kind of celebratory publishing moment, because she cautioned me that students often get nervous about publishing. So I figured that will be the way that we kind of wrap up the semester together. I had initially hoped to do the publication a little bit earlier so that we could kind of have this period of waiting and seeing how it got responded to as it was out there more publicly. I didn't feel like it was fair to the students ultimately, so I've given them more time, but you'll see here that they have 5 days between publishing and then the day that they're kind of submitting it to me. So if they publish it and then they say like, oh my God, I realized I didn't do this, or like there's this typo or whatever, they can go back and revise it. So I guess I'll say that off the bat, that was a lot of steps. The students felt overwhelmed, but I think at this point in the semester, what it means is that they've done a lot. They have all the materials, right? It's not that thing where they get to the end of the semester and suddenly have to pull everything together themselves. We've kind of checked in along the way, and I think that's pretty valuable. I also gave the PhD students options to do their own paper, and some of them are doing that, and some of them are actually doing kind of a short conference paper and a Wikipedia entry. So we've kind of done a mishmash of options. I should also say that in terms of grading, because of my own pedagogical beliefs and the nature of COVID, students are doing their own grading this semester in general. So I have a rubric at the end for them to assess themselves, but I'm not that concerned about that. So a couple of outcomes and challenges just to report so far. They have come up with awesome topics. They are heavily biographical. Some of the topics include Marguerite Long, who was the first female instructor at the Paris Conservatoire. She's an early 20th century French pianist, and she has no representation on English language media. She has French language media representation. So that student is working across those two sites. Lolita Carbon, who is a really famous Filipina folk pop singer. We have Edna White, who was a female trumpeter from the early 20th century. We have Jue Yao, who's an American-trained Hong Kong-based violinist. And that student too she is Chinese, and so she's using Chinese language sources to translate into English. I think that what this has done for the students so far is give classical musicians, who are so often taught that their world is apolitical or somehow supposed to be apolitical, it has given them a way to really feel like they're making a difference. As simple as that. And it gives them a way of saying, here's a way I can intervene into the world with the knowledge I have as a musician. And I think that's not to be underestimated. It's given some of them more technical proficiency, although I think some of them are nervous about the editing part of it. And so in a way that's allowed them to do some peer mentorship. I've had a few of them give presentations on the stuff they've been doing, and that's been really nice. But again, with help from Lara, some of them I've just said, you know what, write offline if you want, write it just as if you were writing a paper. And then at the end, we'll make it all happen. So Lara and I will be holding some open office hours to challenge or to troubleshoot that. Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to note for the people who might be considering implementing these is that actually not making an argument when you do a lot of research can be really challenging. And so a number of the students have started saying like, so what, I'm just supposed to tell you who this person is? I'm like, yeah, just tell me who this person is. Because they're starting to see in the process of doing research, they're seeing that there are analytical angles here, which is to say that this already in a way that the assignment is a success. They're starting to have an analytical perspective on the production of public knowledge, right? And the nature of doing research about underrepresented figures. So that's interesting, I guess. I wish they had more of an outlet for that. The research can be challenging. Some of them have had to change topics precisely because underrepresented figures are underrepresented, right? It's that tautology. I've also encouraged them to plant the seeds for future research, much like Lara has mentioned. So the student who's researching Edna White, the female trumpeter, she's coming across this whole ecosystem of female trumpet players in the early 20th century. She's not going to write about all of them, but I've encouraged her to include their names in the Edna White thing so that one day somebody else can be like, hey, who's that person? Let me link. I can say a lot more, but I guess I just wanted to give a really, really big shout out to Lara, who has been like a crucial backbone for me. And I think I love learning new things as an instructor, but I often don't feel like I have the time to do that. And knowing that somebody literally had my back to make this all happen has made it so much more feasible. So that's been really, really exciting. And I'm hoping to do a Wikipedia edit-a-thon for our entire school next semester if I can find the time. So Jean, you can help me with that. And I think with that, we only have a few minutes left, but I'll just stop talking. I have a lot of other things I could add as well.
All right, great. Thank you to all of our speakers. We are getting close to time, at least on my iPhone. We have 3 minutes left. I'm going to share the contact information for all of our speakers. But while I do that, if there are questions, please jump forward and let's get a short, brief conversation going. If you can stay past 2, that's great too. So I'll share and leave the conversation to you.
Well, I'll just say thank you for these great presentations. I'm in a third category of person. I'm teaching asynchronously online, which means that I never meet my students in the same place at the same time. And I do have Zoom drop-in hours by appointment, but all my students appear to prefer to email me at great length than to actually talk to me in person on a screen for whatever reason that is. So I have a lot of that going on. And the interesting thing is that even though I'm teaching in a completely different setting, I think everything that everyone has said completely resonates with my own experience of this. So I want to thank you for your encouragement and your moral support, because now I feel a great deal more as if I know what I am doing just by having done what I have done in this setting in which I have never taught before. And I am totally ready, I don't know about ready, but willing to become able to co-organize that editathon with you, Anaar. I would love that. And I think my students would love it too, because I will say that I suppose with every assignment, some students are really into it and some students are not so into it, but the ones who are really into it do feel the sense of pride and achievement and excitement. And I know that they would love to go further with it. And I think even my students who have been more hesitant in a bigger community of students might become less hesitant, might discover that they know more than they thought they did. So yeah, let's do it.
And so if I could wrap up, and we will leave any other questions to be asked, but I love the continuity of this particular presentation. So again, I thank all the speakers. We've gone from undergraduate students to graduate students, and we've gone from the blueprint from the chapter to somebody who took that blueprint and worked off of it, to then Lara's presentation of like, what else could we do? We have a practical example, but there are lots of inspirations out there. So I really appreciate all of that. There's lots in the chat I can save and I can send out to the participants of this Zoom call. But I guess I'll wrap it up there just so we don't go too much over. But the information is here. I can share out this contact information plus the chat, and we really appreciate all of your presentations and your participation today. So thank you. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. All right, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone, as we head off to the holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving, Kim, and thank you for starting off this whole thing. I never would have done Wikipedia at all without your presentation on this open access months ago now. So,
oh, thanks, Jean.
And
well,
I'm a big fan of the Case Western chapter.
You've been a champion right in there. So thanks for your enthusiasm.
Thanks, everybody. That was great. I loved hearing about the teamwork. It makes me feel a little less scared, which is how I approach everything these days, it turns out. So, all right. And Jean, I'll see you later.